Hello, this presentation is on patterns of organization, namely compare and contrast and cause and effect. Let's look at these two statements. And if you like, you can also pause the recording so you can read the sentences. So if you look at these two sentences, the difference is this: in the second sentence, the word similarly is used. And the transition word similarly makes it clear that the author is comparing the two forces. Comparison words signal similarities. A lot of times authors use a comparison transition to show that a second idea is like or similar to the first one in some way. And here are some common words that show comparison. And I encourage you to learn these, memorize, learn them, and in fact use them in your writing as well to practice. So here's an example statement. Very young and very old people resemble one another in their dependence upon those around them. Here's another sentence where the transition words in the same way is used. Notice how these comparison words show that things are alike in some way. Okay, now let's look at contrast, which means looking at the differences. Again, let's read these two statements and decide which one is easier to understand. So if you look at the second sentence, the transition word even though is used. The words even though in the second item make it clear that the writer is disappointed that the movie fell short despite its cast and screenwriter. So these transition words make the two sentences flow better and help the reader to understand the connection between these two sentences much easier. And even though, as I mentioned before, is a contrast word. Contrast words signal that an author is pointing out differences between subjects. A contrast word shows that two things differ in one way or more ways. And contrast words also inform us that something is going to differ from what we might expect. Again, here's the list of contrast words, and I encourage you to read these, study them, memorize them, and recommend that you use them in your writing classes as well, or in your writing in general. Here's the example with while. Notice while is used as a contrast word in this sentence. And here's another one with the word despite. And again, notice how these contrast words signal that one idea is different from another one. So comparison is looking at similarities, and contrast is looking at differences. Now, sometimes an author will compare and contrast in the same paragraph, so pointing out to both the similarities and the differences between two things, namely A and B. So I want you to take a minute and read these three statements, A, B, and C, and put them in order. Which one should come first, which one should be the second, and which statement should be the last. So here's how the sentences should follow. The paragraph begins with an introductory statement that women's labor force participation is becoming comparable to that of men's. And if you see the word however is used, which makes it clear that it's going to be a contrast. And the last sentence, which starts at present, gives an example of a significant gender difference, that women will subordinate their career choices to their husbands. So let's look at this paragraph. And again, you can pause if you want to, so you'll have time to read the paragraph carefully. The main idea is stated in the first sentence. men and women, of course, often have different concerns. So different concerns, so we might expect the content of their dreams to differ. Okay? So that is the first sentence, and it's the main idea. And if you see the transition word different is a clue, is a hint that the paragraph may be organized as comparison or contrast, or in fact, it could be both. Now, going back to the paragraph, do you think it's a comparing paragraph, it's a contrasting paragraph, or it's both comparing and contrasting? So if you look here, skim through it quickly, we have but in only two differences, but we have also likely. It is actually doing both, comparing and contrasting. So what are the two things being compared and contrasted? Yes, it's men's dreams and women's dreams. And how many comparison and contrast signal words are used in this paragraph? Again, take a minute and look at the comparing and contrasting signal words. There are 8 comparison and contrast words are used, and these are the 2 that are comparing, similar, and resemblance. And there are 6 contrast transitions: different, differ, in contrast, but, differences, and while. Okay, here's our next pattern of organization: cause and effect. So again, let's look at these 2 statements and identify the one that it's easier to understand. If you look at the second sentence, the word because is used, and it definitely makes it much clearer and easier to understand the connection between the 2 statements. Because is a cause and effect word. Cause and effect words signal that the author is explaining the reason that something happened or the result of something happening. And here's the list of common words that show cause and effect. So everything we do in life, there is a reason, there's a cause to it. And again, everything we do also has an effect, which is a consequence. So if you look at the example sentence, young babies have weak necks and relatively heavy heads. Consequently, it is important to support the baby's head firmly when you hold him or her. So the word consequently is a cause and effect word. In the second statement, we see the word the reason, that also is a cause. And notice how these cause and effect words introduce a reason, a cause for something, or the results of something. So if you look at here, the cause of something can have a lot of effects, or different, because of different reasons, there might be one effect. What does a behavior or event happen, or what are the results of a behavior or event? An author may then discuss causes or effects, or both causes and effects. So, for instance, let's think about causes, reasons why people smoke, right? And there are a lot of effects of smoking. So, smoking can cause lung cancer, bad breath, bad teeth, or some other consequences, other effects. So let's look at these three statements and try to put them in order. Which one comes first, second, and third? So as the words cause, result in, and leads to suggest, this paragraph is organized as a cause and effect pattern. The paragraph begins with the general idea that losing one's job is difficult and at best and devastating at worst. So losing one's job is the cause, and then these are the next two sentences give a detailed explanation of the results of losing one's job. It could be, the first reason is economic distress, the second is health problems and psychological difficulties, and which leads an increased rate of attempted and completed suicides. So the cause is losing one's job, and there are several effects. Okay? Again, let's look at this paragraph. If you wish, you can go ahead and pause the recording for a second. What is the single effect of being discussed in this paragraph? The failure of pay toilets. The effect is stated as the paragraph's main idea, and the word reasons suggests a cause and effect pattern. The reasons: they angered patrons, they caused more trouble than they were worth, and finally, they triggered lawsuits from women's groups. Reasons, causes, explanations. So the cause is they angered patrons, they caused more trouble than they were worth it, they triggered lawsuits from women's groups. They all go to the effect, the failure of pay toilets. Now keep in mind that a paragraph or a passage may often be made of more than one pattern of organization. So for instance, let's look at this particular paragraph. The paragraph uses a cause and effect pattern. The length of the pregnancy of mammals is caused by two factors, right? The effect and then the two causes. The first and the second one. But the author is also doing a bit of comparing and contrasting. He uses the signal word, contrast word, however, compare, although, and but. I hope that was helpful. Thank you.